Welcome, bienvenue to Crossing the Cultural Divide. It's the toughest part of moving to France with Adrian Leeds. AFUSA is the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. And let's look at a little video. So visit afusa.org because we have a number of wonderful national events coming up. Our French Cinematheque films are superb with Peter de Bruges from Variety Magazine. We have a wonderful program coming up on Capitalism and a program on Berthe Weil, who was one of the first women to distribute art, French art in the United States. So we have great programming. Please go to afusa.org and learn more. Just a few logistics. Please stay on mute during the presentation, stay on speaker view, and put your questions in the chat. And feel free to put your questions in early on because we'll be looking at them. And if there's a way to interact during this presentation, I think Adrian will be thrilled. If there are any technical issues, sign back in after a few minutes using the original Zoom link. And this event is being recorded for our YouTube channel. Adrian Leeds. We're thrilled to welcome Adrian back. She has lived in France for over 30 years. Adrian is an HGTV personality regular on House Hunters International. And the Adrian Leeds Group is a licensed real estate agency property consultation service. So welcome, Adrian. We are thrilled to have you with us today. Welcome.
Renee, thank you so much for that. I love working with you guys, and I love having all of these wonderful people from the Alliance Française on such a fun webinar. This is a topic that I love talking about, so I hope you guys love it too. I have a presentation to share, so I think what I should do is go ahead and share my screen, correct? Let's get this going. Can everybody see that? Yeah, okay. So what we're going to talk about is crossing the cultural divide, which I think is the absolute most difficult part of moving to France. Everything else that you do is just sort of mechanical. Getting a visa, figuring out how you're going to get your stuff over here, finding an apartment to rent or to purchase, that's all mechanical. But then you get here and, oh my, everything changes. So let me just give you an idea of who we are. We are property consultants. We work primarily for the buyer. So we think of ourselves as French property the American way, and we are a licensed real estate agency in France. Our services are soup to nuts. They include all of these things on this list. But one of the primary things we do is actually working with people from the very beginning when they have this, initial idea to move over to France. How do they get started? So we consult with them and help them get the direction they need, explain what the steps are so that they can really move ahead. And really, the real estate for us is the end result. It's just a product of helping people make that move. And as I said, crossing the cultural divide is the toughest part. I moved here 30 years ago. I came on a one-year sabbatical and never left. I'm not the only story like that, I'm certain of it. And I came on a visitor visa. The visitor visa had to be renewed every single year. I did not have the right to work. 2.5 years in, I divorced my husband. I left with nothing, and I had to figure out how to survive. And so I ended up creating various businesses, doing anything I could to earn money. And I ended up wearing an awful lot of what we call casquette, different hats along the way. And something happened to me about 20 years in. So we're talking about 10 years ago. That one doesn't work. That works. I learned something from a diplomat that opened my eyes to every cultural clash I had ever experienced or witnessed. And when I learned this, it was like a light bulb going off. The difference in our legal systems, the American system is English law. The French system is Napoleonic code. English law is everything which is not forbidden is allowed. That means it's based on what's forbidden. And Napoleonic code is everything which is not allowed is forbidden. So it's based on what's allowed. So now, what does that mean? That means that under the English law system, you know you can't do this or you can't do that. You don't steal, you don't kill, you don't do that, you don't do this. And then everything else is possible, which is very open-minded. Under Napoleonic code, you have rules to follow. And everything outside of that is forbidden. So that's very in-the-box thinking. And when I realized, wow, that is the foundation for all of our cultural differences. For me, it made all the difference in the world. And this is where I started. And what I want to say to all of you is that this presentation is not really about the tiny little nuances of things you're going to discover along the way. It's about the foundation of our differences so that you can then go out there and realize, okay, they're doing it this way because of that. How am I going to deal with that when I'm working from my own US default mode? So, for example, a child is given a line drawing of a fish to color, a 5-year-old child. In the US, anything goes. That child can color any which way, and he's always going to be admired for all the creativity he might add to that fish. But in France, if that child has not colored inside the lines, he's going to get a bad mark, a bad grade for coloring outside the lines of the fish. And so that's just one small example, but I'm going to give you a real story that happened to me. About 2 weeks into living here, I went to an open house for my daughter, and the English teacher was describing dictée. Now, does everybody know what dictée is? It's when the teacher gives a sentence and they have to write it down, and then it gets graded for being perfect. Now, I had come out of the LA school system where my daughter's English teacher said, don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about spelling. Just write. And the kids wrote volumes. They wrote books. They had so much fun. It was incredible. So I'm listening to this teacher talk about dictée. And I swear I did this. I held up my hand in front of all the other parents. And I said, so how does that benefit my child? And of course, you can imagine that they all turned around and looked at me like I was completely nuts. But what I realized at that moment was that I'm going to have to give my daughter both sides of the equation, that I didn't want her to turn into sheep. I didn't want her to just follow the rules. I wanted her to be open-minded and creative. So I came home and I said, okay, kid, you can say anything you want to a teacher and I'm going to back you up, but you better be sure of what you say, because then you have me to deal with. And from that moment on, I do think that my daughter got the best of both worlds for that reason. But it was such a rude awakening to see that immediate difference, the difference between following the rules and being inside the box versus doing whatever you want and outside the box. Next, I equate it, this is my joke, okay? I equate it to being put in a straitjacket and then being asked to perform somersaults. because French laws trip over themselves. They write laws, on top of regulations, and then you don't exactly know how to behave. So they have a system around it. Their system, well, they call one of them Systeme D. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But there's something called the gray area. And Emily in Paris this past season actually talks about the gray area. Americans are honest Abes. George Washington chopped down that cherry tree and he couldn't tell a lie. Bill Clinton was impeached for lying about what happened in the Oval Office with Monica Lewinsky. And I can tell you that the French at the time, I was here at the time, they thought, oh my goodness, those Americans, they are such adolescents. Don't they know that there's more important things? That of course he should have lied. Okay, this was not a big deal. He needs to continue running the country and not worry. They shouldn't be worrying about such a stupid little lie. So if you cannot embrace living in the gray area a little bit and letting some of that honesty let go, you're going to have a much harder time in France. Now, Systeme D means to be débrouillé. Here's an old slide. It's been around a really long time. It means to untangle or unfog a situation, because that's what they have to do, right? They have to somehow get out of that straitjacket they're in. So I'll give you a couple of examples of things that they might do. Maybe they're not 100% honest, but they make things work. So let's say you're applying for a visa or citizenship, and you have to have a translated document, an official translated document, and you're supposed to have a document that is only 90 days old. But maybe you get to the 91st or the 92nd or the 93rd day, and you think, oh, for crying out loud, now I've got to go back and have it all redone, and it's going to cost me all that money again. Okay, so an American, of course, would go have it done again. But the French, they would just change the date on the document. Because let's face it, it's the same document. Nothing about it's going to change. When it's presented to the fonctionnaire, they're not going to know the difference. They're just going to check it off that it exists. And no one's going to be wiser for it. So it's sort of like what you're comfortable living with, but you have to get into tune with the gray area a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to struggle with this one issue over and over again. So I want you to pay attention as you go through things and see that maybe it's not always 100% honest Abe, but it's whatever works. And it's Systeme D.
All right. Adrian,
Yeah,
can I interrupt for a second?
sure.
I had a meeting this week with a local in Nice visa expert, and we had a conversation on this subject. And we had a good laugh about making changes like you just described. And he told me of a time when he did that just to make it work for somebody's visa renewal to be accepted. And it was
Yes,
just very common.
You have to weigh the importance of it. After living here 30 years, and this is Patty Sadowskis, by the way, you guys, my assistant and operations manager and jack of all trades. And, you really realize that you can't function in the system as it is if you're not willing to play a little bit of that game. And you have to feel comfortable with it. So it's not seriously dishonest things. It's just things that will make it work, that won't really hurt anyone or affect anything. And so you just have to get over the fact that it's maybe not 100% honest. I honestly believe, though, after living here all these years, that there is the bigger picture. It's like you don't tell your best friend you hate her haircut. You just, these little white lies, sometimes they have to happen. And in France, you have to get used to that. So yeah, so here you are, you're talking with a professional who knows how it works and has got to just make it work. And that's the way it is. Okay, this is a biggie, capitalism versus socialism. France is not a socialist state, it's a socialist democracy. So it's actually mixed capitalism and socialism. It's not 100% socialism. But in the US, the word socialism is a dirty word. And in France, the word capitalism is a dirty word. It's the exact opposite. They actually fear the capitalist idea. And the same way Americans fear the socialist idea. But under capitalism, okay, companies live by profit. That's their motive. They exist in order to make money. Whereas in France, the socialist systems emphasize an equal distribution of wealth among the people, and therefore what they think of it, money plays the role of a servant, not a master. This is a very major difference in the way we see life and the way we see money. So as a socialist democracy, okay, and spreading the wealth, France has a very big safety net. And it's one of the reasons why an American can come to France on a visitor visa and receive healthcare benefits, because healthcare is a right, not a privilege. And once you have lived with the socialist democratic idea, you realize how much more fair it is, how much healthier it is, and that how unimportant money really is. So let's talk about money. You don't talk about money, okay? Money is not the subject. Money does not buy you happiness in France. If you decide you're going to go to business in France and make all this money, forget it, you're not doing it. It's near to impossible to make a lot of money in France, but it doesn't matter because you don't need a lot of money. You've got this big safety net. You know, we grew up, or I certainly grew up, thinking that money was going to buy me happiness. And that's what we were going to do. We were going to work hard, go to college, start a business, get rich, have a big house, have a fabulous car, do all those amazing things. And the truth is, you really need it, because living in the US is very expensive. I can't even imagine what it might cost for me to have, good health care, for example. The French see money as the root of all evil. And they don't talk about money. And it's not what drives them. What does drive them is respect. So when you go into a store and you expect good customer service, you're probably not going to get it, because the salespeople who are dealing with money aren't very proud of what they do. They're dealing with money. And that's kind of low on the totem pole. And just the fact that you're going to go in there and spend your money doesn't make them feel any better. But what does make them feel great is giving them the respect they deserve, because you're in their place. It's their domain. And if you put yourself in their hands, then they're going to really welcome you and do everything they can to make you happy. It's an interesting thing. Same thing happens in a cafe. You go into a cafe or restaurant, never just take a seat. Never just assume that because you're the customer and you're spending your money that they're going to welcome you. No, you walk in, you're going to say bonjour. You're going to say, may I have that particular table? You're going to show them that you respect their position, and they're going to take care of you. And believe me, they will. And you will be a much happier customer all the way around. They are not looking for that big tip. That's not what it's about. Bonjour. Can't tell you how important this is. Everybody needs to read this book. It's called The Bonjour Effect by Julie Barlow and Jean-Benoit Nadeau. It's a way of understanding that the word bonjour is not just a word, it's a phatic word, which means that it's symbolic. And basically it says, hello, I'm in your space, do you accept me? And you really have to say it every single time. You can even say rebonjour, but you cannot do anything until you say bonjour. And it's even better if you say bonjour, madame, bonjour, monsieur. And it's even better if you sing it. I know that when I walk in and I go, bonjour, madame, I get a big smile, a big laugh, and I'm treated really well. You might have noticed, if this has ever happened to you, it certainly has happened to me, because I sort of think, oh, if I say excuse me, that's just as good as bonjour. Like, excusez-moi de vous déranger. But no, what will they do? They will cross their arms. You can't see my arms, I don't think. They cross their arms and they go, bonjour, madame, and they reprimand you. So it's the hint that maybe you aren't behaving correctly. So please, 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 please say bonjour everywhere you go, every time you go in or out. And there is another book that is great to read, and that is Demystifying the French by Janet Hallstrand. It's a great read for cultural differences. She attacks all these subjects. And I love this, this little sign. I think, Patty, you took this photograph, didn't you?
No, but I borrowed it.
You borrowed it. Okay, but it
Borrowed that
says it all,
photograph.
right? Because you're going to pay a lot of money if you just walk in and go, un café. But if you say, un café, s'il vous plaît, it'll cost you a little less. And if you say, bonjour, un café, s'il vous plaît, it'll cost you even less. So you kind of have to remember that idea, right? That this is, this is all not about the money, but it's about making you behave correctly. Next. You probably don't know this, but the French organizational chart is a star, and the US organizational chart is a pyramid. So the companies operate completely differently. Now, with the pyramid, the CEO's power filters down all the way to the bottom, and the employees are empowered. But in the star system, the workers don't have the power. They always have to go back to the center of the star or the responsable to get anything done. So when you're in that store and you want to accomplish something and the salesperson can't do it for you, he has to go back to his responsable. That's why. He's not empowered to make this change. So what I realize is that this idea exists in other aspects of our lives. There are étoiles, stars, and circles everywhere, all over France. You recognize the étoile on the left? And in the US, we are intersections. We are linear. We have to stop and wait for the other cars to pass before we can pass. And so we think and operate completely differently. I know that there are several cities that have tried traffic circles in the US, and the Americans don't know how to, they don't know how to go in and out. They don't know how to do it. When in truth, it's the most efficient way of moving traffic without having to stop. You just go in, you flow in, and you flow out. It works really beautifully. I really think we need to take lessons, quite honestly. I hate this slide. I'm so sorry. When you look up guns in the United States, it's a really sad case of affairs. And we are often asked by our clients, well, I want to live in a safe area of the city. And I had to really think about where in Paris isn't safe. I couldn't think of a single spot in the entire city that was not safe. And I think it mostly boils down to the fact that France does not have the right to bear arms, that there is gun control in this country, and there are hunters, but it's all highly regulated, and people are not carrying guns, and they don't fear that kind of violence. In fact, the highest crime in France is pickpocketing. So I think if you're worried about safety, I'd just worry about your wallet, not about safety, but about getting your pocket picked. Patty got her pocket picked not long ago, right?
First time ever.
Yeah, after all these years.
First
Well,
time ever,
mostly
yeah.
the pickpocketers, they target the tourists because they can see that the tourists aren't paying attention, or, you know, just they look more vulnerable and they tend to target them. So they happen in markets. They certainly happen on the metro in Paris and in other places. But I don't think safety is an issue. And just for your information, Marseille is the highest crime city in France. And that's mostly because of drug trafficking that comes via the port and gang violence. So if there is violence, it's really one of the few places. But I have to say that I have certainly never felt fearful in any way, shape, or form at any hour of any day in any city anywhere in France. Never have felt any kind of I've always felt safe just wherever I am as a woman, a single woman, never felt the need to have company. We as Americans, we feed each other a lot of information. We expect to be spoon-fed that information. But in France, if you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. And we really have to remember that. It wasn't all that long ago, actually. I went to a drugstore and I went to have a prescription filled, and they told me there was a rupture du stock. So that means like it was out of stock. So I left and I went to another pharmacy. I went to 6 pharmacies. By the time I got to the 6th pharmacy, I realized, you idiot, you didn't ask the right question. So when the pharmacist said, "I'm terribly sorry, we're out of the stock," I said, "Well, how do I get it?" I had never bothered to ask such a stupid question. And she said, "Oh, let me see who has it." And she went on her computer. She found that another pharmacy had it. She called them for me, had them hold it for me. That's all I had to do, was to remember to ask the right question. So don't expect someone to give you all the answers. You really have to know how to ask the right questions. I can always spot an American. I can spot an American from at least a block away, because we have these smiles on our faces all the time. They're so in our faces that all of our lines are up and back. Now, part of that is because English uses your facial expressions are upward. That's part of it. But the truth is, we do smile a lot. We are just happy-go-lucky people. And we have these bright white toothy smiles because we've been whitening our teeth, and we just glow, absolutely glow. And the French think we are hilariously silly and stupid because only moronic people smile at anything. I love this. I absolutely love this cartoon. It just says it all. Even when we are sad, we have a happy face. Okay, except when we can't carry a firearm. And the French, no matter what, they're always unhappy, except when Americans go back home. This cartoon just totally cracks me up. I am not asking you guys to stop smiling, though. You know what? I think you should continue to smile and just be an American, because it's really okay. And if they don't like it, tant pis. And that's how I've been all this time. The funny thing is that even with all that, I think they kind of enjoy it. I think it makes them smile too. One of the other things, though, I think you'll see, which has really been interesting to me, is the idea of the glass being half empty versus half full. And what you will discover is that the French tend to see things from the negative point of view. So when they say pas mal, we would say great. And when we say right, they would say n'est-ce pas. And when you call somebody and you get a secretary, in America, they say, hold on. But in France, they say, ne quittez pas, don't go away. It's a nuance, but it's the negative to the positive. So don't mention it in French is de rien, it's nothing. And if we say sure, they would say pourquoi pas. This happened to me very early on, where, someone said, we asked someone, would you like to go get a cup of coffee? And in French, she said, pourquoi pas? And this is when I was married. My then husband said, pourquoi pas? That's really rude. That means you have nothing better to do. Why would you say that? And it was something I realized that they would never just say sure, because that's the positive aspect of it. For them, pourquoi pas is sure. So I started reading the subtitles on American films, and it's really evident when you read them, you'll see how often the negative and the positive scream culture. So have fun doing that. This fascinates me too. In the US, our class level is determined by our income level. In the UK, your class level is determined by your birthright. And in France, your class level is determined by your level of education. And that says it all. It means that nothing is revered more than intelligence. And it's knowledge, not resourcefulness, it's knowledge. And this speaks volumes for me in terms of how we perceive our differences. Personal space, privacy, and speaking loudly. I was at lunch today. I went to the prefecture today to get my 10-year card. After 10 years, I had to have it renewed, and I went to pick it up and spent 2.5 hours standing outside in the freezing cold waiting to get in to pick up the card, which is one of the things you'll end up doing when you get your visas. And I noticed a few things. First of all, people were, standing very, very close together. Americans have a much larger space bubble than the French. There was a woman who absolutely had to be touching me. She was not happy unless she was touching me in this queue for 2.5 hours. And I like to sort of like step back and, oh, I'm sorry, like to kind of make a little bit more space for myself. According to something I read, our conversational space is 2 to 4 feet apart, and the French have a 1 to 2 feet apart. So they're much closer. So you're going to get to know your neighbor, but they don't like queues. They don't stand in queues. This queue to a boulangerie is about as queued up as anybody's going to get. And they sort of know who was before the other person, and they might sort of respect that. But the woman all the way to the left over there in that white jacket, I fully suspect that she's going to find a way to cut that line, which would be Systeme D, and be proud of it. So don't be surprised if you see someone sort of worming their way in without being noticed and actually being proud of it. But the French are very, very private people.
Yeah.
And
Adrian,
yeah,
I want to add something too that I notice when you're sitting in a restaurant or a cafe. The French tend to lean in and speak to each other so that you're
Right.
having a private conversation. But if you're near a group of Americans, they're more likely to be leaning back in their chairs and shouting at each other across the table.
I had that happen today too.
Right, right, exactly.
We are known to be very loud. Everybody knows it because we are. Americans don't think anything of speaking at the top of their voices and yelling across the room. I went to lunch after the prefecture. There were 2 tables of Americans. They all knew each other, and they were literally yelling from one table to the other. I did not say a single thing because I knew that I was just going to get myself into trouble. There was no way around it. But when I was in Los Angeles last week, there was a table across the aisle from me, and there was a guy, and he was clearly on a date with a woman, and he was yelling. He was yelling to the point where she was going further back, further and further back. And of course, he was so disturbing that we couldn't have our own conversation at our own table because he was so loud. I asked the waitress, who was German, I said, is there anything we can do about this guy? And she said, unfortunately, it's not our policy to tell our customers that they should lower their voices. So there was nothing I could do. But I think that we're just so used to speaking, we're taught, speak up, be heard, be confident. We are taught to do that and to show that that we can stand up for ourselves and all those things. Whereas the French teach their kids how to modulate their voices from a very early age. So yes, the tables are smaller. You're in a more intimate space. You have to lean in to hear one another, but you don't want everybody in the room to hear your conversation. So I'm going to beg all of you to please be conscious of the fact that the French are being quiet and not to be the loudest person in the room, because for us who live here, it can be really embarrassing. Patty, do you want to tell your stories about having told a couple of people to be quiet and then they paid for your dinner?
That's the story, yeah. It was
Well,
another situation of Americans leaning back in their chairs and talking loudly across the table in a very close space. And my friend and I could not hear each other. So I finally said politely to the young man next to me that they were talking very loud and we couldn't hear each other. And he did apologize. They did kind of lean in and talk more softly. They got up, left. My friend and I finished our dinner. We went to pay, and the waiter said, "Oh, your dinner's already been paid for."
wow.
So the people I complained to, they bought us dinner, which was really shocking.
Well, you have the right touch, because I always end up in a fight. I have
It
not.
drives me crazy. I'm sorry, it drives me crazy, and I want to teach them a
I
lesson.
know, but I have not learned how to be diplomatic, so somebody needs to. But I think that we're just, it is the way it is in the US, because I was just there and everybody is really loud and nobody thinks of it. And so I think we're just unconscious. But, when you're on the metro and no one's speaking at all, it's all very quiet. And then you hear people kind of yelling across the whole car, "Oh, we have to get out over there," or yelling across the street or something. And you realize, no, they don't do that. Please. Anyway, next, collision in the workplace. This is really interesting because we have very different work habits. And so every time I've heard of an American working in a French group, there's some sort of collision that happens. There's also the organizational chart, which is different, and that contributes to it. But because the French are following the rules, they weren't really taught to consider solutions. So in general, they're not going to present an idea or a solution unless they are sure it will work. Whereas we don't think there's any such thing as a bad idea. We'll consider any idea. So an American will throw out all sorts of ideas, even if they make no sense. And that's just the beginning of the problems in the workplace. There is such a thing called the right to disconnect. And believe it or not, it is illegal for employers in France to expect employees to respond to work emails after hours. So when it's quitting time, it is quitting time. There's no weekend stuff. There's no holiday stuff. They are off. And that's one of the things we love so much about France. So you can expect that if you're working within a French environment, that you're going to have some real issues. I had a client, an American, who was brought over here to run a French company, and he had a reverse situation because he was the boss. And getting his employees to feel comfortable calling him by his first name, bringing him ideas, having real dialogue was his own, culture clash, because they were not used to his style of management as well. It's really interesting. And if you're going to be working in France with the French, then you really have to learn how to play the game. You might have noticed, if you've been emailing us, that much of the staff have now been putting autoresponders on for nights and weekends, because we would get an email on a Friday evening, and on Saturday we'd get a second email saying, I just emailed you, why haven't I heard back? And so we now have an autoresponder on so that we can have real French weekends, nights, holidays, without having to work. So please consider that there are off hours. Oh, tout est compliqué, tout est compliqué. Since the French admire intelligence, if it's too simple, then it's no fun at all. And it has to be complicated for it to really make any sense whatsoever. So I have this washer dryer. By the way, if you want to keep things simple, when you buy appliances, buy German appliances. They're usually pretty straightforward, but the French appliances are not. And I have this particular washer in my niece's apartment, and I had to sit down with the instructions. I swear it takes a PhD to run it. It's a washer with a dryer combination, and there's no dial for dry. So I had to figure out how do you dry if there's no setting for dry? So what I learned is that you actually have to set it to wash. You have to choose a wash cycle, so let's say you choose synthetics, and then you choose it to dry after the wash. And then you take the wash cycle off so that it only dries, which is not exactly intuitive. But fortunately, I figured it out now. But be prepared that if you're staying in a rental apartment and you want to do laundry, that you might not be so simple like a GE washer, where you just choose, cold, hot, warm, hot, then you choose the spin, you choose this. No, not going to be that simple.
Adrian,
yeah.
I'm just going to add, in the laundromat, the washing machines are easy to use.
Oh, in the laundromat,
the
right?
laundromat, they're easy to use, right?
Well,
None
they're
of that
also
complication.
separate.
And they have separate tumble dryers.
Right, they're separate, so they're not quite as complicated. By the way, just on that note, I'm going to go back to that, okay? Because in spite of the fact that this is complicated to operate, it still works really well. And people always tell me, oh, no, I don't want a combo washer dryer because they don't work. That is not true. They do work. It depends on the brand. So you just have to be careful that you buy the right one. I have a new one. I just invested in my own washer dryer in my rental apartment. It's an Electrolux, and it's even more complicated than this one. I'm definitely going to need some sort of instruction. I'm going to have somebody come in and teach me how to do it, because even reading the instructions, I can't get it. I'm too stupid. I want something simple. On that note, crossing the cultural divide is the most difficult thing you're going to have if you move to France. Everything else is just mechanical. But I'm going to go back to this idea that if you remember the Napoleonic Code versus English law, you can figure it all out. Because the minute you don't understand what's happening, you can say, oh, now I get it. They're following the rules. That's all that matters. It's not about logic. It's just about that. So, you know, it is easier than you think. It's not complicated to move here. We have helped thousands of people make the move. Starts with a consultation. We strategize with you to how to make it successful. We do believe in getting good advice and paying professionals to put you on the right path. I have two things I'd like to say to you that are just basic everyday advice to help you get through your fears, and that is not to ever let fear get in the way of your dreams. You need to let go of your fears, because fear is a complete illusion. It's what you imagine in your mind. It's not reality. And to replace the word expectations with hopes, and you'll never be disappointed. And we do quite a lot of things, not just property. You can subscribe to our weekly Nouvelle Lettre. We write 3 a week. You can see us on House Hunters. We run a coffee gathering with a speaker every month in Paris and every other month in Nice. You can participate in those when you're on the ground. You can always book a personal or a group consultation. And when you participate in webinars such as this one, then that's lots of fun. And we also record them on our YouTube channel, so you can always rewatch them and send your friends to them, and learn a lot that way too. So on that note, it looks like we've got about 15 minutes for Q&A.
Adrian, I want to add one more thing on the cultural side of living in France.
Okay.
Is just the need to be patient.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yes, the need to be patient.
You mean the 2.5 hours that I waited in line in the freezing cold today to get my...
Well, that's one of the things, but things just don't always happen in the time frame you think they should. And as Americans, we also want to try to fix things. And we have to let go of that mindset too. And if you're just patient, somehow or other, the things always tend to work out.
They always work out.
Yeah.
Even if it takes longer.
Even if it takes longer. Yeah.
True that. I just know everybody wants to talk about culture. This is like the most fun subject.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. I'm thinking, here we go. Larry has raised his hand.
I see that.
And Larry, if you want to unmute yourself, if you've got a question, go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. It wasn't letting
There we
me.
go. Excellent.
Hi, I'm his wife. So Larry held his hand up, but I got the question. I'm having difficulty in knowing exactly what people bring when they put it in the container and send your belongings over to be picked up by customs. What do people bring? Do they bring any furniture, or is it, what sort of things do they bring with them?
Well, I would say that this is completely off topic. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
However, you
Okay.
can bring whatever you want.
Okay.
Whatever you want and need, you can bring, but do not bring appliances that are not dual voltage, because that's a waste of time and effort. But do bring linens, because they're expensive in France. And do bring hefty Ziploc bags. And do bring great saran wrap. Those are the things. Otherwise, everything else you can get here.
Except that the bed sizes are different.
Well, but slightly, not enough to worry. Not enough to make a difference. Okay, what's up?
Okay, Lorraine. Lorraine, do you want to?
Yeah, it's both Lorraine and Isabel. Hi, everybody.
Okay, you see that.
Hi.
Thank you.
So we have two questions. So the one question is with regards to kind of fudging a little bit the date. Let's say on a birth certificate, you have a date, you get it within 90 days. How do you fudge that?
You mean the
If it expired?
Well, okay, so if you have a translated document and it's on a PDF, All you need is a PDF editor to change the date.
Okay, you're talking about the translation, got it. But if
Yes, only the translation, yeah.
it's in French, you can fudge that because you get it legally from the.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
no, you have a legal translation which is certified. We use Devron. I like Devron translations. They're inexpensive. You go online, you upload your PDF, they translate it, give you a certification. And if it's a PDF, you just change the date.
Got you.
Don't
Okay.
tell them I told you to do that.
No, but in our case, actually, we have two questions. So we are French citizens, but we live in the US, and we are planning on coming to France on the 1st of January, excuse me, for 2.5 months to spot a place where we would like to land, given what's going on here in the US. And one of the questions is a carte vitale. So how does it work for French citizens who lived abroad, who want to come back or want to live in France? What are the criteria? Because I hear it's 100 and we have to wait 180 days.
I have absolutely no idea.
And
Uh-huh.
that's
no, 'cause
another
we're
off-topic
is
question.
over, not the French, but that's a question for an immigration attorney.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I wish I knew, but yeah.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? We've got. Now I can't see the people who raise their hands. If someone wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free, but do make sure it's on the
Alicia,
topic
sorry.
of culture.
Go ahead.
I have a question. I don't know if I'm on the screen, but my name is Raquel. Okay. My question is about the culture for seniors in France. In other words, in some cultures, the elderly are highly regarded. If you're on the train, people are going to get off and give a lot of deference to their seniors. What is it like for seniors in France?
Well, I'm a senior. I'm 72 years old.
You're an
And-
exceptional senior.
Yes, well, nobody
age
gives me
in
their
your-
seat, okay? I guess
Okay.
if I let my hair go gray, I guess they'd give me a seat. I don't know. I think that generally the French have a lot of respect for each other. And I think generally they treat each other with real politeness. I think it's rather amazing, actually.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
Yeah,
go
you're in
next
charge.
if you're still having trouble seeing people who are raising their hands. I'll go ahead. This is Sharon Simmons.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
And my question goes back to the linens because I'm actually beginning to start to box up. I'm going to be doing a move to Florida for several months. I live in Atlanta. I'm moving to Florida for several months to let my condo sell and to process my
Are you
visa.
moving to Florida because it's a non-taxable state and because you can get a driving license?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
And I'm not entirely sure if I'll be able to get a driver's license before I need to leave. That's less of a priority than moving out of a taxable state is.
Hi.
For me. But the question I have goes back to the linen question. I currently have a king size bed. I'm quite certain that, and I'm going to be renting apartments. I don't
You're
plan.
not getting a king size bed.
That's what I thought. So should I make the assumption of if I'm going to buy linens here to take, should they be double or queen?
Depends on what you end up with.
Well,
So
okay.
don't take them yet.
Yeah,
just
the
put on a
standard bed
return
size
It's
is
just a phone,
100.
money. It's just there's nobody there.
Yeah.
There's nobody there.
I'm hearing different people talk all at once, so I didn't really get.
Yeah, everybody else needs to just stay muted. I would wait until you see what you've rented
Gotcha. Okay.
and ask. Yeah.
That'll be a question for Patty. Because probably going to be the person that I work with. At least she's the person that I'm dating with thus far. And my initial consultation is with her in January.
Great.
Right.
So-
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Patty. Good to meet you. That was my question. And so is it possible to bring, like, I was also told that I should bring like my favorite snack food.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop you here because this is off topic and you can ask Patty all
Yeah.
those questions.
Gotcha. I apologize. Thank you very
No,
much for
it's no
answering.
problem. I just want to go on to cultural stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Hi, this is
I
Randy.
don't
I'm
know
gonna,
how to raise my hand, sorry.
can I jump into the queue?
You're already jumped in, I
Right.
guess.
I know I'm getting into the spirit here. So I'm trying to stay on topic. My question is, are there any surprises that we should know about before we come over there? Like an example might be when you rent something, I've heard that you might be surprised by hidden costs, and I'm just using that as an example. Thanks.
Those are all things that when we work with you to find your apartment, that you're going to learn in that process. Clearly everything's different. But again,
Mhm.
that's the mechanical aspect more than cultural.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's the cultural stuff that's harder to deal with than the mechanical stuff.
Mhm.
How do you deal with so many smokers? Everyone smokes.
How do you deal with smokers? You let them
Yeah.
sit outside. You go inside and you let them sit outside.
Hi, Adrian. How are you?
I don't notice them.
Hi, what's your
Hi.
question?
First, congratulations on your grandchild, on your grandson. That's so
Oh, thank
exciting. I've been
you.
reading that. That's wonderful. So I just wanted to say that. But honestly, I don't have a question, but I've traveled back and forth to France several times. I'm an American, obviously. And I'm fortunate to have friends there, and they've given me guidance. And I found what helped me a lot is just to let go of my sense of entitlement. Like I feel like in the States, like we just feel, I'll speak for myself, I feel entitled to almost everything. And I left that at the door. And it's amazing what a difference that made to be more open, to me, more respectful, to remember that I was a guest. Even if I'm living there, I'm still a guest. And it made a huge difference for me. We're looking forward, took 3 weeks off last year during both hurricanes in France. That was not fun, but we stayed in Little, and we're looking forward to spending some time in Nice. So hopefully I can buy Patty a cup of coffee
And
or a
I want
glass
to
of
thank
wine
you
when
for
I'm there.
that comment because that's really good advice.
Yeah, it's true. It really
Really
is. So thank you for always doing these. This is wonderful. Thank you.
I had a cultural question.
Sure.
So I've done reading and had some experiences, and I'm wondering about tips that you have for actually getting to know and becoming friends with French people. I know that, typically they won't invite you into their home and they're very private, but I don't want to just be in France speaking to other expats. So what would be your suggestion?
It's very difficult. I think, okay, I want to make a comment to what you just said about their privacy, because it was one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit. Centuries ago, the French were assessed for their taxes by virtue of what they owned. So they became insanely private about showing off their wealth, which is why they don't let you in their doors. Okay, they don't open their homes to you. We say, "Hi, come on in, go to my fridge. What do I care?" Right? And they do not let you get much further beyond the front door. You would never go into their apartment or home without asking permission, for example. Okay, for this reason, because they're very private. That being said, they really don't care about getting to know you. They have their own friends and family that they've grown up with, and they're not interested in meeting foreigners. The people you will have an opportunity with are either going to be participating in, say, an organization you're in, where you have a mutual something in common. That is one way to get to know these people. Our French-English conversation groups are a great way to meet the French, because you're in this one unit together. You're speaking French and English. So you're meeting French people that way. But I think the people you have the best chance with are the French who have lived outside of France and speak English. So they're more international and they will have more interest in, in meeting Americans. Otherwise, very difficult. And that's why the expats are so important,
Adrian, can I just make a quick comment to Gail? She kind of disappeared, but I just wanted to say I am going next week to Paris, and I made friends with a woman there who teaches at La Sorbonne about 4 years ago on in a writing group. And over the 4 years, it's been a very gradual, but by like the second or third year, she invited me to a family home in Brittany where we did a writing workshop. And now, just last week, she invited me to have Christmas Eve dinner with her family in, their Paris apartment. And it's kind of blown my mind, but she does speak English and we have this in common. So my point is that it takes time, as you've already said, the patience. And also, I've made a lot of efforts to learn not only like French, but, and even though my French isn't that good, a lot of them speak English, but also to what subjects are good to talk about.
So, but it happens kind of organically. It has to happen organically. You can't really force it. And even after 30 years, I have a handful of French friends, literally only a handful. Now, when you do make friends with the French, they are tried and true. They are, it's a deep relationship. It's not a surface relationship. There's no question about it. And you will treasure that forever. Yeah. We're over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Adrian, maybe we can take one more question on
I was going to
culture,
say one more.
and then, yeah.
Jim Lesser's had his hand up for quite a while. Jim, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Adrian.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Patty. I didn't really have a question, but I wanted to share on a couple of points that other people brought up is from the woman who was talking about respecting elderly people and how that is. I know a friend of mine was walking her dog one evening and some young gentleman rushed past her, jostled her, and sort of knocked her into the street. This was in front of a bar. 5 men sitting at the bar saw this and ran down. They checked to make sure she was okay. I mean, she didn't fall or anything. She was just sort of shoved off into the gutter. But they raced down the street, brought the guy back, and made him apologize to her.
Wow.
That's one thing. The other thing is I, thanks to Adrian, I own a home in France, and I live there 6 months a year. My neighbors, who are French, have all been very welcoming and have invited me to apéros. And one woman found out that I really like cassoulet. She made cassoulet from scratch one night, invited me over for dinner. So, with a little bit of, hospitality offering and, and making sure that you say hello to them in the street when you cross paths and, and chat about the weather. It doesn't really make that much difference. They become very welcoming. Of course, I live in a little town. I don't live in Paris.
You're in a village, Jim.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my comment.
It's not that they're not welcoming or friendly or any of those things. It's just étranger means danger in French. Okay. So strangers are dangerous. So you have to create a relationship first before they're going to be welcoming. But we all know that, one of the things that amazes me about living in France is that because it's not about money, when you create a relationship with the merchant, with the waiter in the cafe, with the, you know, the boulanger. They will remember you. They will treat you with respect. They'll remember what you order all the time. You actually end up with a real relationship with these people. It's not just, hi, John, I'm John, I'm going to be your waiter. And then he forgets all about you. No, it's called, there's a real relationship that happens. And it's one of the things that I've seriously enjoyed over the years. You know, hey, I have my favorite waiter at Cafe Charlot. He takes care of me no matter what. He knows exactly what I'm going to order. I don't even have to say anything. And I don't think that would ever happen in the US.
And you know you've made progress when they give you their name.
Ah, yes. And you don't have, you shouldn't necessarily ask for it.
Right. They'll offer, you might give them yours. And
Yes.
if they give you theirs as well, you've made progress.
But it's kind of intrusive in a way to ask the waiter's name. It's private, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. On that note, should we
Yeah, I
say
think we're out of
so
time, Adrian. And I think that everybody who has any further questions can reach out to you and Patty directly.
Great, you would love that. Happy to do that. And then this, of course, I'm going to make sure that this is on your YouTube, on my YouTube, so other people can watch it if they didn't have a chance to tune in today. And just watch your American default mode, okay? And remember that you're in somebody else's country. And when in Rome, do as the Romans. When in France, do as the French.
Thank you so much, Adrian, and wishing everybody a wonderful holiday season.